Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Waxcast. This is episode 26. I am your host, Gavin Wax, and today I'm joined by a friend of mine, a fellow podcaster, a best-selling author, and host of On the Run podcast, Remso Martinez. Remso, thank you for joining us.
Gavin, I'm so happy that we've survived the first 11 days of 2021. Congratulations.
Well, I think you being in DC, you probably have a lower chance of survival, especially going forward, because I think we're in for a lot more fireworks as we head towards the 20th. What's going on down in
Did we
DC?
switch cities all of a sudden?
Well, listen, New York's not much better, maybe on the margins, but you guys down in DC, you know how to really know how to kick off a revolution, so to speak. But what's going on down there? What's the vibe? What's the aura?
I drove through South Capitol today, head towards Navy Yard, and it's quiet. They've got a lot of law enforcement. They've got Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia National Guard up and around. Nobody's really out. This is January, and despite being pretty cold, post Christmas, this is when we're supposed to have tourists here. And this is probably the emptiest I've ever seen it. All of 2021 was pretty empty, but usually between August, December, you saw more tourists out. They're not there. The city is just it's quiet. And it feels weird to say that because it always used to be, if you want to get out, if you want to see something lively, you go into DC or you go into Alexandria, Arlington, and Northern Virginia, beautiful cities. And it's just different. Nobody wants to be outside. It's almost like a bomb has gone off and people are looking around for those Charleston Heston mutants from Omega Man, or the stuff that Will Smith
Yes.
had to fight. So it's
Yes.
just odd. I have, I left, I came back midday, and I, usually I'd be going out meeting clients. I mean, I'd be going out, seeing people coming in and out of Dulles Airport. Life here, they've sucked. This has nothing really even to do with just the last week. This past year, they have just sucked all the joy out of living here.
Yeah.
And I've been living here since 2007, Gavin.
Yeah.
This is I wanted to live here my entire life, and as I announced on Parlor, rest in peace, I had to announce elsewhere. It's rest in power, Parlor. I have to leave this area. I'm leaving and I'm never coming back. And they've killed all the joy. Now it's just bad weather and higher taxes.
Oh, everything you're saying really aligns kind of closely with what I'm seeing up here in New York. I mean, I'm born and raised here in the city, and I've never seen in my lifetime what it's come to. I mean, even it's just dead, like you said. There's the soul is gone. There's just no life anymore, and it just like a whole just aura has just overtaken all these major urban centers in America run by Dems, and it's just really just put a bad taste in everyone's mouth and sent everyone fleeing for the nearest sunshine state or peach state or wherever the hell they're going. But I mean, you've kind of gone across the political spectrum a bit. I think you still consider yourself a bit of more of a libertarian. I think you voted for Mr. Trump. I'm not sure, but what's your take on the future of this country? I mean, you saw what happened down in DC. You were in DC with what happened. I mean, are we heading into a really dark place in our nation's history? I mean, that seems to be the general consensus. I mean, how do we get out of this, in one piece?
I voted for Trump because he was the only one that didn't want to lock down the country again. I mean, it came down to two things: basic property rights and your right to make a living.
Right.
And I'm very blessed. I have the ability, no matter what I end up doing in what industry, I will always be able to ultimately work from home, work from my laptop, work from wherever I want. I've set up my life in that way, and I'm very blessed with that. But that can't be said for a majority of the country. And it took me, when I was at the Washington Times, it was a great opportunity. I loved working there because I got to travel a lot, and I traveled to a lot of places. I traveled to, Tennessee, Detroit, all over the place around the East Coast and the Midwest. And, it was just, it reminded me of what the other half of the country has to go through. Because really, right now, what we have is really this moment where if you thought that America was rough after 9/11 with like the TSA of all things inconveniencing people, like imagine what the COVID equivalent of the TSA is. And now it's like, you're not allowed on the internet if you voted a certain way. And we're not going back to that. And here's my one criticism of the people that like marched to DC the other day. And I didn't go to it because, I'm just like, it's done. It ended when the Electoral College was certified. I was hoping that maybe they could get some recounts. I don't think Rudy Giuliani did that great of a job with his lawsuits, just my opinion. But really, it's coming down to some of the people there, and I might be harsh, but some of the people there, they weren't fighting for a limited government. They weren't fighting to limit executive powers. They weren't there advocating for lower taxes. It wasn't the Tea Party. It was a lot of people that showed up there because they didn't like the results of the election. And the more I look back at it now, I don't know how it's working out, but I do know this: Joe Biden's going to be president, and ultimately, it's coming to the point now where Republicans and Democrats they'd rather fight about who gets to control the gun, who holds the power of the greatest force of the greatest monopoly of violence on earth, versus, hey, maybe we should just leave each other alone for once and not point this gun at each other and then vote to see who gets to point at everybody else. It's one of the reasons why I'm leaving, and I'm not telling people where I'm going. I'm going to be out of this area by the end of the year. I'm going to a low population state where I don't see my neighbors when I walk out of my house, and I'm going to try and just be as left alone as possible and quiet and peace, because it's at the point where the things that I used to advocate for, and I spent the most productive years of my 20s working in what used to be called the Liberty Movement and everything else. And it's like, what, did my part, I'm done. Y'all shat the bed. I've got to go at this point because this is not safe.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy what you're saying. And I mean, look, with the people marching in DC, I mean, I think, as you said, there's a lot of people in this country who were driven into destitution. They were driven into unemployment. They were driven into, bread lines, quote unquote, not because of any fault of their own, but because of this government that's basically mandated that they cannot work, they cannot open their business, they can't make a living, they can't support themselves, they can't support their families. And this is some of the most tyrannical overreaches we've ever seen in our history. There's really no precedent. I mean, you were talking about, the aftermath of 9/11. It's just like pales in comparison, pales. And that basically helped spark the liberty movement you just spoke of, kind of in the following years that came after that, with the war on terror, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, what's the movement that's going to come out of this? I mean, how can a movement even arise organically with, as you said, big tech essentially, silencing millions upon millions of people who don't agree with the current, corporatist orthodoxy that's being spewed? I mean, there is no public square. There is no public discussion. There are opinions that are deemed acceptable and there are opinions that are deemed bannable. And it doesn't seem like we can even come to any kind of middle ground consensus or anything with anyone anymore, because the die has been cast and the battle lines have been drawn. But I mean, that's not a recipe for anything good to happen. I mean, I know you and many others are definitely getting out of cities and, maybe returning to maybe more local living, more off the grid, building communities. I've heard all this kind of just being like, removing themselves from politics, et cetera, et cetera. But, there's only so many places people can run. And I feel like, when big government and when big brother, wants to get you, they can get you. And that's what I'm worried about.
And I mean, I can't disagree with anything you said. I think you hit it right on the head. In terms of what is needed, I mean, it's not gonna make a lot of people happy with me, but it needs to be said. America First can't go away.
Yeah,
America First has to be here. We need America First politicians. Secondly, we need people willing to actually go ahead and enforce the law. All the conversations about Section 230, it's like we don't need to reform it. We just need to actually abide by the law. It was pretty clear about what is there and what needed to be done, but nobody had the stones to actually go ahead and enforce.
And I think that's a good argument. I think there's a good argument to be made that they're not even applying the current statute correctly, and there's been already violations of the current statute. I mean, I'm open. I'm not open. I'm very, strongly in support of reforming it and clarifying it. If not,
what does that look like?
I mean, listen, if you want to be a platform and you want to get the privileges of liability protection for things that are published on your platform, you simply can't editorialize. And that's sort of what the intent of the law was now, but it's obviously not being interpreted as such, maybe due to the vagueness, maybe due to the courts, maybe due to whatever you want to say. But I think even the most libertarian defenders and other defenders of 230 will say, listen, the only way you're going to have online platforms is to have some sort of liability protection. Okay, fine. If you want to be a platform, you don't want to be responsible for the opinions held on your platform, you can get these privileges from the government, because that's what I think it is. It's a liability protection. It's a privilege to have that. It's only given to one set of industries, one set of companies. So, I mean, I don't even think it's a free market thing. I think it's more of a pro-business thing. But if people want to have it, that's fine. But at least obey the letter of the law and say, listen, if you want to be a platform, you want to be a free and open exchange, you cannot editorialize, you cannot, just destroy content and individuals that you don't agree with, you don't support, and you can't just have subjective standards. They have to be applied equally, and your terms of service are going to have to be litigated over like a contract, because if you're going to apply your terms selectively while taking advantage of a government privilege, you got to come under the microscope and you got to be held accountable. And none of that is happening because the law is just it's just not, it doesn't have enough meat on it to me.
I agree with you, and I think I'll meet you halfway. I think action should have been taken by the executive branch the moment the first fact check label went out.
Yeah.
The moment they did that a year ago, that's when it should have happened. And everything that has happened since has just been egregious on all measure. And I mean, well, I think right now, I know that Parler as a company, they're suing Amazon because of what happened. But Devin Nunes brought up something which I think, is probably the best case right now, which is the government and all these other people allowed Twitter, Google, Facebook, I mean, freaking Pinterest banned the president. Like, when Pinterest is getting involved, when the recipe site is getting involved, there's a problem. But, there's no way none of that was coordinated. And
it was racketeering. I think I heard it on Fox, racketeering, right?
Absolutely. And that's one of those moments where it's like, they actually walked into this, and there's a case, because there's no way on God's green earth all of them decided within the span of, I think it was 5 hours, Gavin.
Right.
5 hours on Friday afternoon, all of this happened.
And they did the same thing. And, say what you want about them, but they did the same thing to Alex Jones. It was very coordinated. It was all systematic. And they are operating in many ways like an oligopoly. And, people don't want to claim they are, but they are. And I think, there's a lot of people, particularly in the libertarian circles and the free market circles, which, I once, strongly ascribed to, that don't seem to understand that these entities are so intertwined with the state, especially things like Google and these other companies like Apple, et cetera. I mean, there are contracts with the federal government. There are privileges being granted in law. There are tons of things that are allowing them to operate like a monopoly that they refuse to admit just because they are, in the most theoretical of terms, a private entity. Okay, but if you can't look into the nuance of these things, if you can't look beyond just the surface, you're never going to be able to come up with correct policy prescriptions to handle their overreaches, like what you just mentioned, the racketeering. And that's why people have just become blinded, and they've just become so, just apathetic to what they're doing. And it's really detrimental to society as a whole. And now the biggest dagger of all, we were always told, well, go build your own app, go build your own site. People have done that. Gab has done that. Parler did it. I don't know where the hell they are right now, but
rest in power, Parler.
Rest in power. And what did they get for it? They also got targeted. They got targeted from a different sort. Now it's, they're getting pulled from their servers. They're getting pulled from the App Store. So big tech, it's a centralized sort of cartel. And people don't seem to want to grasp that, and they don't want to seem to tackle it because they have this sort of, they're blinded by this ideology, or they just don't, or they support what big tech is doing because they're on the left. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, I mean, monopolies only form because government protects them enough to be able to secure that. And right now, with Dorsey and Zuckerberg months ago, when they said, "Oh, I'm more than willing to help you write the laws and write the regulations," it's like, that's the last thing you want right now. They're going to write the competition right out of existence. Right. But, I mean, I'll even take it a step further, man. Like, remember back in, the before times of like 2005, when like Democrats were all against like GMOs and corporate farming and stuff.
Oh, how novel that those days were.
Oh yeah, so antebellum, and it's like they were so mad at Monsanto because Monsanto has this incestuous relationship with the FDA where it's like, it's a revolving door. You just go from lobbyist to being a regulator, and it's over and over and over again. And I was like, hey, I'm all for that. Put a 2-year ban on you going from like one of those agencies to a like sector and immediately getting into that. I would even throw it to the Department of Defense. You cannot go from working in the DOJ or higher up in the military and immediately go work for Raytheon or Northrop Grumman or Booz Allen, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's like with the left, I'm willing to meet you there because we don't live in a world of angels,
Right.
and to understand that these people don't have an immediate vested interest. I'm not saying kill the market, don't allow them to work where they should work. What I'm saying is, the best thing to do is to put a little bit of a stopgap between that.
Yeah. Something. I mean, I think that's a common sense reform. I mean, that's more of a reform. I wouldn't even call that a market regulation. That's a regulation of a government entity. That's a regulation of a government agency's hiring practices that I think most people should be able to agree with and say, listen, if you're going to have an agency that has this much power, that's this centralized, that has this much control over industry or society, do not let them become a revolving door, as you said, from the very industries that they're seeking to regulate. I mean, that's how you get regulatory capture. That's how you get these situations where these industries are simply taking advantage of the laws that they themselves wrote. It's not a healthy society. It's not a just society. It's certainly not a free market society. And as you pointed out, most of these monopolies throughout history have always been some kind of a byproduct of government. And I'm sure in 100 years, when they write the textbooks about the 2020s, I mean, I'm sure there'll be very interesting textbooks. They'll maybe even point to things like Section 230, because at the end of the day, what other, industry has protections from liabilities? Like, even I could still sue a newspaper. I may lose that case if it's defamation or whatever it is, but I still have the ability to sue them, and I could still get to the point of discovery and stuff like that. It'll never be dismissed on standing. I mean, rarely would it be dismissed on standing. I mean, it would simply, proceed. It would cost the newspaper money. They have to factor this into their business operations. There is a cost. There is a legal cost to operating in a certain way that they don't have with Twitter. And Twitter could operate as they want to operate now. If they want to be a curated platform for a pre-approved left-wing, West Coast, Silicon Valley ideas, they could do that, but it has to come at a cost, namely through liability, where they're spending our money and lawyers to fight off, lawsuits about either, destruction of content or, manipulating things or defamation or whatever the different cause of actions may be. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. But whatever it is, they're still putting out money. That hurts their bottom line. And then that would enable, and it would certainly make the market even easier for a competitor like Parler or Gab to come in and say, listen, we're not going to get involved in all this liability nonsense because we're just going to be open to everyone.
Yeah. And I mean, it's what I try and do is I've been trying to look at all these things just from the last 4 days. And what we're seeing is a lot of whataboutism. The people that are crying for socialism, and they were laughing at small business owners as they had their businesses burned down. They're like, oh well, I hope they had insurance. Now they're ascribing to free market principles, and they're like, well, they're a private company, they could do whatever they want. And it's like, I'm looking at this, and it's like what they basically said was people on Parler, and most of the time it was like Parler helped organize what happened last week. Well, that's like saying that Facebook was responsible for the $8 billion worth of damages to cities across America in 2020 during the BLM Antifa riots. It's like, all you can do is just basically say that. When I say that out loud, it sounds like ridiculous because Facebook didn't do that.
Right.
But the people on Facebook did, and those people, those individuals, should be held accountable. Now, what happened in 2020? Because now we've just memory hold all of that. Facebook was taking down all the anti-lockdown rallies that were happening in like Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, because it was a threat to public health. But the moment that you had to go and march for BLM or Antifa or something, it's like, no, this is good. This is appropriate. Good job. We're going to let that on there. That's the moment where it's like, that was an editorial decision.
Yeah, the hypocrisy is it's insane. I mean, and it's so overwhelming to a point that it's always hard to just like be able to just deconstructed and point out all the instances like you did just now, which was actually a great illustration of some of them. But it's so overwhelming what these tech companies have done over the last year, few years even, in terms of, how they project onto their competitors like Parler, claiming Parler and Gab are like these, alt-right neo-Nazi sites that ferment, racial divisions, and, they're trying to take down the government. But then they themselves are acting in the most egregiously biased ways to promote certain political movements that are very much violent, while, crushing, nonviolent political activism in the case of the anti-lockdown riots that you said. And no one in the journalism class of this country ever wants to call them out except a select few. They get away with this. It gets memory hold, like you said, and we all collectively forget about it because big tech has such an overwhelming influence on our lives, our day-to-day, what we do, just personally and politically, how we think, how we talk, how we engage in the public square. I mean, they literally are operating like, almost like a semi-sovereign state in many ways, because they get away with a lot of the things they do, and they have so much influence over society and how the public discourse proceeds forward that it's almost impossible to really tackle them without, really just losing the battle before it even begins.
Yeah, I mean, I've called it this for years, and I used to get in trouble when I was at the Washington Times with my team because I would say this publicly in front of like Facebook and Twitter, but I would call them the largest rogue digital nations on earth. And they would be like, you can't say that to them. Like, well, I could call them publishers. They might be more offended by that.
Right.
Because they're certainly they certainly do not meet the legal definition of platform. But I want to tell you a quick story, man, because right now I'm just doing digital consulting. I'm primarily focusing on small businesses. Half of all small businesses that closed down in 2020 are closing down permanently. They're never coming back. So right now, if there was ever a time where I could use my knowledge to help small businesses try and make up what they can, it's right now. But there's a friend of mine out there, Dan Smots. He has a podcast called The System Is Down. He also has a business, and his wife has a business completely separate of what they do. So they have their own personal Facebook pages. They have the fun podcast he does. Then he has his business, which is the number one source for client referrals. He got in trouble for sharing an article that Facebook deemed as misinformation or something like that. They took down his personal Facebook page. They took down the Facebook page for his podcast. Then what they did was they banned his wife, who was an admin for one of those pages. They took down her business page, and then they suspended her account. So not only did they take out their personal pages, they took down their podcast pages, which as I'm looking at these things, it's like there weren't previous violations. It was out of nowhere. And then what they did was they killed their source of livelihood. They literally went after their businesses, which complied. They treated all of it the same, and they got rid of it. And now he's trying to build it back up, but he can't make those pages. I mean, he's at the point now where it's like you weren't just affecting, his ability to speak with people and his ability to have a hobby, but you're affecting his ability to make money and feed his kids.
It's sick. It is a sick power trip from hell what they're doing, and people are going to look back on this as some of the biggest consolidations of wealth in human history. I mean, we have absolutely destroyed, some of the most productive elements of our economy, namely small businesses, businesses that give communities, life and energy, and that support millions of American families. We have destroyed them under this boot of government, and we've had these massive multinational globalist corporations, whether it's big tech or Amazon, consolidate themselves, increase their earnings, increase their profits, and benefit immensely from this. And it's not healthy for society. I don't think this is a healthy thing for society. This is certainly not the natural or organic outcome of market forces. This is all external. And, people put tons and tons of money into these platforms like Facebook, whether it's ads or building up their pages and their followings, only for it to be ripped out under them. I mean, people could spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to curate an audience on Facebook over the years. And then Facebook just deletes it in a second. You have no right of appeal. You have nothing. And your money basically meant nothing because you have no rights on Facebook outside of their, terms of service, which they abuse themselves. And the platform, the pages and the assets you build on there, you don't really own them. You don't really own them because they could either take them away from you, or even if they're still up, they'll just manipulate the algorithms to make them essentially useless. So I hope people will get wise to that going forward and realize, you put money into these platforms at your own risk, because you may get some of it out in the short term, but long term, I mean, it could go away in an instant.
Yeah, I mean, I use the term digital sharecropping. It's like you're
That's
just
good.
getting an opportunity to give a little and get a little, but they're gonna get everything else. And the big product is these companies, they don't make money through ads. Ads is the function, but what do they make money from? They make money from big data,
Yeah.
and that's ultimately what it is. That's why the product is free, because you're the product on these platforms.
Right.
And I've been telling a lot of people, it's like, listen, you're going to have a hard time, because Dan's story was just one example. And he's coming on my show tomorrow to talk more extensively about it. But I have spoken with at least a dozen businesses. And, you mentioned Alex Jones, 2018, in the before times. Like, it used to start with, we're going after the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists and evil people, ISIS, that type of stuff. Then the sliding scale moves further, because they see how they could do that and how fast and easy it really is. And they're like, what else can we apply it to? Then they go after Milo Yiannopoulos. Then they go after Alex Jones. And whether you love him or hate him or not, they're moving the scale further. And now they've been able to do that to the most powerful man in the world. They've been able to do that to Donald Trump, the president of the United States. Now, love him or hate him, people, if they could do that to him, they're doing it to you, because now the sliding scale has become so big. Everyone who's south of Mao is by default a right-wing extremist now. And, libertarians get mad at me because I went on 2 years ago and I said, if you think because you made fun of Trump and you make fun of Obama and you make fun of everybody, you think you're safe, you're not safe. Because until you start towing the line of the woke agenda, until you start making your profile a pic of black square, until you start saying we're all Antifa now, until you start saying stay home or else you're killing everybody, you're gonna be treated just like everybody else, because it happened to them, and the sliding scale keeps getting larger and larger, and now it's happening to at minimum 75 million Americans right now.
Yep. I love that term, digital sharecroppers. I think they want us to be sharecroppers just in general, in real life or in the digital sphere. I mean, the way this society is being, corporatized and centralized, and, we're all going to be working as Amazon, forklift drivers sooner or later. But,
what does South Park call it? The consumer worker?
Yeah, I mean, but that's what it is. It's all, and that's what it's been like for a while. It's all debt financed consumerism. We've shipped off a lot of the productive jobs overseas that really supported, middle America, flyover country, allowed people to, start families, build businesses, create communities. They're left with, just debt, drugs, and then the occasional, barely self-sufficient, self-supporting gig at some white collar job, and it doesn't support themselves. And, maybe some cosmopolitan areas in the country have benefited from this. Maybe, the people that, like maybe, me and you could work at home and support ourselves through lockdowns, but the rest of the country can't. The rest of the country isn't able just to learn to code or whatever, mocking thing the media throws at them. So it is kind of disgusting. But like you said, I mean, I think libertarians are just living sometimes in la la land, where they look at their theories, they look at their maxims, and they look at, the things they've been taught, and, much of it is brilliant work, but they're just not applying it to the real world, and they're not looking at the nuance, and not looking at what's really happening. And that's why we've seen this massive overreach of government, of corporate, tied in entities with the state, and it just keeps getting worse and worse.
Yeah, because, I mean, if I have to see, well, they're a private company and they could have the right to refuse service, it's like, stop defending these people. They don't like you. No amount of ass kissing and white paper is going to make you likable and acceptable.
Yep, exactly. If you become like their token defender, and you try to always, everything is with a caveat. It's like, well, I support this, but I don't like Trump, or I don't like this, or I'm socially left, I'm socially liberal. It's like, come on, you guys are pathetic. You guys are pathetic because you'll never defend the people you disagree with, maybe on the right, and you'll let them, take the brunt of this new Orwellian, tyranny, while you, just speak your platitudes, ad nauseum, and it doesn't get you anywhere. But, we could talk about this forever, but there was another topic I also want to touch on with you a bit that seems to have just been brushed under the rug with all the crazy news of the last week.
UFOs, right?
Well, maybe I was going to just bring up WikiLeaks, unless
Oh
you know
yeah, that too.
something. Well, I mean, we could talk about UFOs. I would love to talk UFOs, but let's keep it a little more grounded here and just talk about and let's talk about WikiLeaks, which had a massive dump. That sounded wrong, but they did have a massive WikiLeaks dump, and a ton of stuff was put out there on the interwebs. And I believe you were kind of, looking through it a bit. I mean, what is in these files? What have you seen? What did you unearth? Unless you can't speak about it because you're worried for your life.
Bro, I do not have information that could lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton. But like seriously, like that is like it was like fear porn on like a new level. I'm looking at this thing. I'm like, how big can this? Oh, it's a giant zip file,
Yep.
and you could see it right now. Like people are telling me about stuff in there that I can't even find. Apparently, there's something about the Vegas shooting in there, and
I keep hearing that.
I tried to find it. I can't find it. So unless somebody's better than me or they already found it, I've tried all
Talk
the
about memory holes as the Vegas shooting.
that feels like eons ago, but like there was just some I called it WikiLeaks roulette. I just would randomly scroll around and then click something and see what disaster I would pull up. And Pinochet and then Congressman John McCain were apparently friends.
Oh, interesting.
John McCain thought that he was a bit too harsh on communists, which is
Of
like,
course he did. Of course he did.
okay, John, all right.
I thought I was about to give McCain a plus point here for being friends with Pinochet. I mean, at least in the base department, but then he says he was too hard on the commies. Okay, well,
He's looking up at us laughing.
yeah.
There was, there's just some random stuff too. Apparently, Coca-Cola paid off the Tunisian government because a few years ago, a Coca-Cola truck driver ran over 3 kids. So instead of it actually like hitting the courts and becoming like a big issue, the Coca-Cola was just like, here's some money, bury the children. And it's like,
Wow.
how is this going there? Another
I
thing
mean, that's
was,
not even a big story, but it's interesting. I mean, it's just like the stuff you'll find in here.
it's just like, I don't know if I really should have cared about this, but I'm more disturbed now.
Yeah.
There was another thing about one of the superintendents at West Point basically saying, we need to lower the standards for minority students to improve our optics. And you see him like writing like, no, we got to lower this. You got to bring that. We need more of this. And it's just like, those are handwritten notes. There were a few other things. Like, it's just so weird. They were spying on fraternities. Fraternities, like I don't know, like go on there. There's a section where it's just in the R section for like rituals. Like they're spying on like college fraternities and stuff. I read that and I'm like, this is just kind of odd. Oh, Louis Farrakhan was right. The CIA was spying on him.
Okay.
So all those years, everyone was looking at Farrakhan. They're like, "Louis, you crazy?" No, he was actually being spied on.
Are you in the F section right now? Is that why you went from fraternities to Farrakhan? Are you
All
like,
over the
is this all alphabetized?
It's all over the place, man.
Yeah.
It is. It will take me months to get through that, and I'm already gonna tell you right now, I can't get through all of it. But just from like the dozen things I saw there, it's like this is what we needed. It's like, wait, if you thought you couldn't distrust everybody else, there's more.
Yeah. Well, we needed like our weaponized autists over at 4chan to dig through this and just pull out all the good bits, save us all time. Because every time I see the big WikiLeaks dump, I'm like, listen, just give me the spark notes, all right? Tell me where Hillary was praying to the ancient Canaanite god of Baal or something. That's what I want to see. Get me to the the satanic ritual parts and let me check that out. But I can't read through all the benign stuff that's in there. But I mean, it's crazy how this has just been buried. And again, our journalist class in this country is dead. I mean, you've worked at outlets before, and it just seems like no one has the energy or intellectual curiosity to really dig for truth, dig for answers outside of a few organizations. And something like WikiLeaks is doing the work of an entire industry, and that industry is just ignoring it collectively.
I mean, it's like when was the last time you heard of like an actual investigative piece, Gavin?
I mean, we had the Hunter Biden stuff that got shut down from the Post.
Okay, there's one, and what happened? Dead.
Ronan Farrow, maybe. I mean, trying to think of stuff like maybe Ronan Farrow with the Me Too thing, which that eventually kind of got pushed under the rug.
There was the Afghanistan papers, which was relevant for like one day in 2019.
Okay, I don't remember that. If you have to remind me, shake up my memory about this.
It was basically a whole bunch of reports from a whole bunch of people who were in DOD and in the Bush and Obama administration, basically saying we're never going to get what we want out of this country. The Afghanis are far too corrupt. Like there's nothing we can get out of this. We need to leave. Like the cops are crooked. They're stealing our stuff.
They're raping little boys.
Yeah, like it's like we need to leave because there's no winning here. And that was popular. I remember I was at the Times at the time. I'm looking at the New York Times article, and we had some op-eds responding to it, pro and for some of the stuff that came out of it. And it was relevant for like one day. For like one day, America's looking at this, and it's like, we should bring them home. And then the next day, impeachment. And it's like, oh, well, that was a nice Christmas present. It was a 5-minute miracle.
It is just so amazing and scary how the media has just mastered the art of controlling the narrative, controlling the masses' attention, what they're interested in, what they'll focus on, and being able to just shift things around in terms of public perception. I mean, it's really scary. It's the kind of things, the Soviets and all these old repressive regimes of old would have just dreamed about being able to do. And somehow in the United States, I mean, obviously it's done under private auspices, but it's certainly, I mean, we talked about racketeering earlier, we talked about cartels. I mean, we've heard the CNN morning calls from Project Veritas. I mean, a lot of the media, a lot of reporting, a lot of quote unquote journalism is this top down directed thing from a handful of executives who have a market cornered, who all agree ideologically, who all, go into the same circles of friends and cocktail parties and whatever it is. And they seem to be some of the most powerful people in this country. And many of us don't even know who they are outside of maybe a Zucker.
Man, it's the self-licking ice cream cone. That shit never melts. And, I was joking about like UFOs and stuff earlier, but like
let's delve into that. Because they've been opening up about the UFOs. I mean, they've basically put stuff out there and be like, listen, we're the DOD. I don't know what the hell this thing is.
Did you ever see that Christopher Nolan movie, The Prestige?
With the magician.
Yeah, it's got Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. And
probably a long time ago. Yeah,
but the idea of The Prestige is the last act of a magic trick. It's like the big trick wasn't what you were focusing on; it was what was in the other hand type of deal, and that's where the real trick is played. But that was one of those things last year, and now suddenly it the first week of 2021, last year DOD comes out, as you said, Department of Navy. They're like, listen, these are unmanned, UFOs that just defy the laws of physics, and they're definitely not man-made. And then we see the Tic Tac video from those F-22 pilots, people who have served in like the Gulf War, invasion of Iraq, 2003 type of stuff, like, Kosovo. Like, these are not people who just make shit up.
Right.
And when you watch those videos of that stuff just like zigzagging around, and these combat pilots in the Navy are just like, this is pretty screwed up. This is pretty weird. This year, they signed a defense bill last week that nobody knew about. That happened Friday night. Thursday night, they're saying, overthrow the president. And then Friday night, they're like, can you sign this? And somehow he signed it. And we're putting like thousands. I'm sorry, not thousands. That's chump change. We're putting hundreds of millions of dollars in further UFO research. It's like, listen, man, I argue with government spending a lot, especially in those defense bills. But when you start up Space Force, when you start putting out, we're in like the Tiger King phase of quarantine, and then we're losing toilet paper, and we got the murder hornets, and then all this stuff happens, and you're telling me that there's like unnatural, inhuman, like not from Earth stuff out there that's making contact with us, and it's messing with us for fun. That's not just something you just toss out there. That's a giant concern.
Yeah, and people just seem to just like brush under the rug that we have like these unmanned. I mean, who knows? Maybe they are. Maybe there's someone in there. Maybe there's a living organism inside. But they define gravity in terms of how they move through space and just our reality. I mean, they're just jumping around. They don't seem to operate on any kind of propulsion. I mean, it just boggles the mind, and we have no comprehension from a scientific point of view how it's happening. It has to be otherworldly. I mean, I don't want to say it, but I want to say it. Aliens, as the meme.
Dude, you got to mess up the hair a bit more.
Yeah,
Gavin.
yeah.
Have hair.
I mean, I have the hair a little messy, but it's not quite that guy's level.
That's one reason why I want to move far away from DC. Like I've seen Independence Day. This is the first place that goes down.
Well, you know what's funny? I feel like most of the sightings of these things are usually in like those rural, middle of nowhere areas. So you're probably going to end up in like that ranch somewhere where the machine lands, and you wish you were in DC.
Where my cows go.
Exactly.
You're trading the anal probing for the massive destruction of every major population. You gotta pick your alien apocalypse.
So do you believe in aliens? Let's end it off on this. Do you believe in aliens?
Yes.
Okay. I was about to say, did we lose him there for a second?
I had to think. I'm like, once you say this, you can't unsay it. Like,
Right. It's
man,
on record
that
now.
stuff, like, I would like to be wrong about many things. I
Yeah.
would like to be wrong about this, but they're not gonna they've tried to cover this stuff up for years. There's too many unexplainable things. And if this past year showed us one thing, it's that when the US government, who, whether you trust them or not, is saying that they're dealing with stuff that defies the laws of physics,
Right.
I take that a little seriously.
What it seems to me, it's like I feel like there are deeper entities within the deep state, or this, kind of hidden state that exists, that knows a lot more about this than the regular, more front-facing State Department officials and DoD officials, etc. So I feel like
Marine Harp is not getting the UFO briefings.
yeah, exactly. I feel like these DoD guys release these things because they don't know, and it's been sitting in some of their records for a while, and they have no idea. And there's probably like some other agency that we don't even know exists. That's some like secret, hidden, classified entity or institution that's probably like giving them crap for that, saying like you don't release this without our permission. I feel like there's something going on behind the scenes because it doesn't make sense to me that they would have sat on this for so long and now they're just releasing it to the public, just scratching their head. It just seems like it makes them look dumb. It makes the United States look like we don't know what we're doing. I mean, it doesn't seem like organized. It doesn't seem to make much sense.
This might creep you out when I say it, Gavin, but if there are two people who I believe 100% what they say about UFOs and potential alien contact, it's these two people, Bill Clinton and Harry Reid.
Okay, yeah, they're big into it, aren't they? Into it?
Bill Clinton literally said in 2001, listen, I tried to see what was in Roswell. I tried to see what was in Area 51. I tried to find the aliens, and even I couldn't. And trust me, I tried.
Wow.
And then Harry Reid, he actually threw a fit while he was in the Senate. He put himself on like the aeronautics and aerospace transportation, whatever that committee's called. That's not a really popular one. But he went there because he had an interest in this stuff, and he raised Cain with DoD and all these other agencies, Department of Defense, whatever. Like, he was just like, why is it so hard for me to find information on this stuff? And
Right.
why is it the stuff that we do have has like none of the key details in there regarding UFO contact, especially over American airspace? Like, Harry Reid wasn't doing it out of the goodness of his heart. He was doing it because he couldn't get access to something and he was angry. Therefore, he's going to tell everyone how angry he is. So if there's two people that if like you don't trust anything, you don't like them, you don't believe them on anything they've ever done, when it comes to this topic, me, Harry Reid, and Bill Clinton are on the exact same page.
I'll add another one. I heard that John Podesta is very into this as well, and when he was in the Obama administration, he was a big advocate for uncovering whatever this stuff is. I mean, it's just kind of crazy to me that the most powerful people, in the American political scene of the last 2 decades were completely bewildered by this and completely cut out. It's kind of scary because, whoever is in control obviously has quite a bit of control if they're able to say no to them.
Who has higher authority than the president when it comes to this stuff?
That's a very good question. And who is funding them? Where are they getting their money and resources from to operate? How are they, acting in this way? I mean, it just seems insane. I mean, granted, maybe they're lying to us. Maybe this is all just a giant gaslighting operation. But I have to kind of, believe them in this sense. I don't want. Yeah.
Do you think we'll get an answer in our lifetime?
I think the way things seem to be accelerating in 2020 and 2021. I mean, we may be getting a lot of answers in our lifetime about a lot of things. Maybe the aliens will be the least weird of them all. But let's leave it on that note. Let's leave it on that note,
Agreed.
Remso. But I want to pass the last word off to you. Please let our listeners know where they can follow you, where they can subscribe, where they can hear your latest musings. And thank you again for coming on the Waxcast.
Oh, Gavin, time went by way too fast. You can go ahead and follow everything I do. Hey, Remso, across the internet before all that gets taken away. On the Run with Remso W. Martinez, available wherever Al Gore's amazing internet allows you to download podcasts every Monday and Thursday. And if you're tired of politics, secondprintcomics.com. Secondprintcomics.com is all about comic books, pop culture, the things that will make you realize, I could spend a few hours focusing on this and not everything else in the world. So yeah,
it's a healthy thing to do. We got to return to our hobbies, return to things outside of politics. But anyway, guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Waxcast, Spotify, iTunes, Apple, Google, wherever the hell they have podcasts. We have it. We are listed. And also on iTunes, please leave us a 5-star review if you can. Thank you guys, and stay tuned for more.